a terrorist attack at a tween pop concert, and President Trump's first foreign trip. Our roundtable on how the U.S. should proceed on figuring friends and enemies in the Mideast. Plus a preview of this year's Mackinac Policy Conference. Today is Sunday, May 28, 2017, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint on this Memorial Day weekend. And sad to say, yes, there are way too many memorials being planned after another horrendous terrorist attack in Europe. The ISIS statement claiming responsibility for the attack said that it happened at a gathering of the Crusaders in Manchester. Crusaders. That seems a very strange and warped way to describe the young girls who dance and sing along to Ariana Grande. It happened as President Trump was in the midst of his first overseas trip as commander-in-chief. It's a trip that's going to be remembered certainly for some awkwardness between the president and first lady, between the president and the prime minister of Montenegro, and there were some chuckles when he arrived in Israel and said he had just gotten back from the Middle East. But those were more temporary moments. The ramifications of the visit and the attendant policy decisions run much deeper, and there is a lot to chew on. He talked against the dangers of Islamic extremism in Saudi Arabia, which some would describe as the birthplace of a lot of Islamic extremism. And yet we're cutting deals with the Saudis while waving angry fingers at Iran. That's noteworthy because as the president was beginning his trip, the people of Iran were electing the more moderate candidate as their leader, a seeming signal that they want to be a part of the more modern world. Some might argue the more Western world. I've said before on this program, there's no such thing as permanent friends or permanent enemies, only permanent interests. Well, where are our interests in today's Middle East? That's just ahead. Also, we'll get you set for what we expect from this year's gathering on Mackinac Island, which takes place next week. It's all this morning on Flashpoint. I don't think I need to run down the long list of oops and uh-ohs in American policy in the Mideast. Look no further than the training and weapons the United States gave the Mujahideen in their fight against the Soviet Union. And a few years later, that included a well-trained and well-armed former Mujahideen named Osama bin Laden. I could go on, but instead, let's focus on where we are coming off the trip to the region by President Trump. So happy to have with me this morning, I think, a great group to talk about this. Amir Zahar is the adjunct professor at the University of Detroit Mercy and also a frequent stand-up comedian. So we'll add maybe a light note on everything that's happened this week. Alan Gale is here with us again from the Jewish Community Relations Council. Alan, good to have you here. Saeed Khan's been with us before, professor of Near East and Asian Studies at Wayne State University. And of course, Osama Sablani, well-known publisher of the Arab American News. Gang, thank you all very much for being here. Saeed, let me start with you. As you've watched this week develop, I pointed out sort of the conundrum for me, but it also seemed to be a conundrum for Michigan Congressman Justin Amash, who came out later in the week and said, we're cutting a $500 million arms deal with a nation that has a really awful civil rights record, human rights record in Saudi Arabia. Where are we?
Well, where we are is following the money. And what we find in the case of Saudi Arabia is not only a $140 billion arms deal, but a total trade package of $350 billion. And we see that along with 50 CEOs going with the Trump entourage, what this is really about. Now, that speech that he gave at Riyadh was really not about Islam. It was about fortifying the Gulf nations, particularly in their stance against Iran, which you rightly said is a country that just had its elections and re-elected Hassan Rouhani, a moderate. So this shows and reflects what the Iranian people have as an agenda for their future. Now, getting back to Saudi Arabia, we have to contend with the fact that a lot of those weapons are going to go down to Yemen, where the Saudis are committing what many people say are war crimes, the starvation of an entire population of people, and the use of these weapons in a proxy war that they're fighting with Iran. So on the one hand, one can say it doesn't make any sense at all from a diplomatic or a geostrategic vantage point, but if you take a look at the economics of it, it seems to make a little bit more sense.
Amir, we sometimes lose track of these things as we chase the money or chase a momentary interest, but the region never forgets what we do. Our fingerprints end up on things like perhaps weapons in Yemen.
Well, this is why it has become so hard for us to define what terrorism is anymore, right? I mean, terrorism has become this word which only seems to mean things that are committed by Arabs or Muslims anymore. And in the Arab world, and Muslims around the world will sometimes say, you know, what's the difference between a bombing that might happen at a concert or bombings that come from planes? Either way, it's terrorism to us. Either way, it's something that we don't deserve that's coming at us from enemies that we don't deserve either. So, I mean, you know, all this stuff that's going on is kind of illustrative of what's been going on for the last, you know, 100 years in the Arab world and the Western world's participation in it. And Saudi Arabia is one of the craziest examples. I mean, one of the biggest frauds that's been perpetrated on America and the Western world is that Saudi Arabia somehow represents this idea of some the right or moderate strain of Islam, when that's not true. I mean, if you talk to most Muslims in the world, Saudi Arabia doesn't represent them or their interests or the way that they think about the world. But yes, you follow the money. Saudi Arabia sends tens of thousands of students here every year. They have agreements with American universities. They pay exorbitant tuitions. There's just money that flows back and forth.
Osama, that's why some people felt that when the president put together his travel ban list, it included a lot of nations where we've never seen someone from one of those countries perpetrate a terrorist act on U.S. soil, but the Saudis have, and they weren't on the list because that's where the money is, was the suggestion.
True. It is true. And we should not really justify the summit that happened in Riyadh and the money that has been spent in Riyadh just because we are getting this money. I think what happened to our principles, what happened to the freedom, you know, like we brag about the democracy that we are trying to implement all over the world. I mean, we invaded Iraq under the banner of we wanted democratic, free Iraq. And now, you know, like dealing with the Saudis this way, just getting their money and then bowing to them, that is not what America is all about. And I think that it's important for American people to remember that the former president, what Barack Obama told the Gulf countries, in Saudi Arabia in particular, go and talk to the Iranians, start a negotiation. This president is saying, go and fight the Iranians. And that is not really a very smart thing to do. Destabilizing the region further, bombing Yemen and sending Yemen into the old ages, you know, in stone ages. It's a poor country, and now it is a devastated country with cholera, starvation, malnutrition.
It's a disaster.
You know, 17 million people are on the edge of starvation.
Alan, as a Jewish American, I'm curious as to what you thought watching this week. He was clearly the warmth between he and Benjamin Netanyahu, I think, was comforting to a lot of Jewish Americans. And yet, as you watch these other things that played out, the other things that were happening, what was your takeaway as you were watching?
So, Devin, I want to be optimistic. You know, I look and I see that that George W. Bush went to Israel at the end of his term, his second term. That Barack Obama did the same thing. And here you really had the reverse. You had Trump taking his first foreign trip to the Middle East, including to Israel. He appoints a special envoy, Jason Greenblatt, who goes weeks before. He puts in his own ambassador there. He also empowers his son-in-law to do some of this work. And so I think there is
good or bad?
I guess we'll see.
We will, yes.
I mean, at the beginning you talked about, you know, what's ahead, and we're not really sure what we can predict. But I think I think myself and I think many American Jews want to be optimistic that President Trump went there. He's taking it seriously. He's the guy with the art of the deal, and maybe he can make a deal where, you know, Israel and its neighbors can finally come to peace.
The story, the line is always that Israel is in a rough neighborhood. You have a hard time finding allies anywhere around you. And yet I do wonder, when you look at Iran, which even though over the years has pledged to do everything it can to destroy Israel, we see a culture, a society that looks much closer to the one that we recognize than what we see in Saudi Arabia.
I think what we're seeing in the Middle East is change. I mean, I think that the way the media paints Iran is not the complete picture. Yeah. I think that under the table, or, you know, under the radar, Israel's making alliances with countries which it hasn't before. So I think alliances, I think things are changing. There's a lot of ferment. You know, we haven't talked yet about the Russian influence in the Middle East, and you know, when Trump goes to the Middle East, well, you know, how does that play, you know, to the Russian influence?
Before we get to the break, talk about the Russian influence there. We've certainly watched this very fraught, tense line between the U.S. and Russia over Syria.
Well, what's happening is Russia is looking to get back into the game. Since the end of the Cold War, Russia, I mean, a very big country, a very powerful country, a very proud country, has felt marginalized. If you remember that during the 1990s in the Balkans, literally their backyard, the United States decided to circumvent the UN and go with a NATO airstrike. And we find that over the last 20 years, there's been a lot of this unipolar, unilateral action that's been taken by the US and by the EU moving into former Russian territory, like Eastern Europe, through NATO as well as the European Union. They're feeling encroached upon, and we're finding that Putin, who of course we could do a whole show about him alone, has very good, has a strategy to find ways to now oppose the United States, if for no other reason but opposition. And at the same time, we have to be mindful that it is a powerful country and one that we have to deal with diplomatically as well.
More to get to. I got to take a quick break. We'll continue. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. Back right after this. Welcome back, Flashpoint, talking about figuring out friends and enemies and how to view the modern Middle East as Americans. Amr, you said something interesting earlier about the way that we describe and sort of categorize the terrible things that we see happen, like what happened in Manchester last week. I do find myself wondering all the time if we simply were to dismiss the terrorist focus and simply call it a crime, a murder, if we would start to take out some of what these misguided souls seem to be lusting for.
Well, I mean, look, we see in the media all the time that when a crime gets committed, no matter how massive it is, once they find out that this happens all the time. So if a white guy commits a crime, they come out 2 hours later in the media and they say, we can confirm that this is not terrorism, okay? This happens all the time. So, you know, a couple years ago, that German guy flew the plane into a side of a mountain in France, killed 150 people on the plane, and CNN talked for 2 weeks about depression. Okay, so this is what we see happening all the time. That and you know, I have to talk a little bit about what Alan said. We see it happen in Palestine. I'm a Palestinian, and everything that happens in Israel affects me just as much, if not more, than any American Jew. And so Palestinians are labeled as terrorists all the time, simply by virtue of them being Arab or Muslim, when they're fighting for their land. There's 1,500 Palestinian prisoners on hunger strike for 40 days now in Israeli jails, asking for the simplest rights, and it's gotten absolutely no coverage in the American press, even though it's been covered in social media all the time. And then Donald Trump saying, when he went to Israel, that he just got back from the Middle East, is actually really telling in a weird way, because Israel has this sort of like attempt to become something European in the Middle East, which it's failing at, right? And this idea of being this colonial project in the Middle East, in many ways, it does see itself as not part of the Middle East. I mean, it wasn't really as much of a slip of the tongue as we think it was.
Oh, interesting. Alan, do you want to take a whack at that?
Well, I certainly wouldn't agree. It's not. I don't think it's colonial, because the Jewish connection to the land goes back thousands of years.
Well, it's not an exclusive connection.
This issue of the prisoners, and I can't give you the case of every prisoner, but if you go back and you talk about terrorism, and certainly a lot of it emanates from the Middle East.
How do you define terrorism?
Well, all right, so it's an attack, an unprovoked attack against unarmed men, women, and children.
Well, Israel does that all the time.
Well, so you talk about.
You're cited by the UN for doing that kind of stuff all the time. I'm not making it up.
Back to these prisoners. You know, Israel suffered to a tremendous terrorist. All these events back in the early 2000s, it was called the Intifada, and the way Israel broke it is they went in.
The Intifada wasn't terrorism.
They
and
went
in fact,
in.
Israel commits flagrant violations of international law.
Well, if you let me finish, and one of the ways that Israel solved all that, it seemed like there was a never-ending line of suicide bombers coming in and blowing themselves up on buses and in cafes. And Israel went in and they got people, and they got the preachers, and they broke the cells.
Sure.
And a lot of the people in those prisons today in Israel are because of that. And all of a sudden, you don't have suicide bombing.
Well, unfortunately, very little of what you said is true. So the prisoners are asking for they're not asking for release. They're asking for family visits. They're asking for things that they are guaranteed under international law. Further, hundreds of the prisoners being held that are under hunger strike are under administrative detention with no charges at all for months on end. So actually what you're saying is not true.
Let me jump in. Osama, this is what, it was interesting to me when President Trump suggested that solving Middle East peace was somehow simple. Because I think we get, just in watching this exchange, the deep complicated set of issues that it's going to take 1 foot forward, much less.
It is complicated, but it must be addressed. I don't think that we should always leave and stay away from the Palestinian-Israeli conflict just because it is difficult. We are facing right now all the problems that we are seeing in the Middle East. They're coming, and the source of this conflict is the Palestinian-Israeli. So we must address it. It's difficult, yes, it is not easy, as Mr. Trump is trying to lead us to believe, but we must address it. But the thing is in here that when we talk about terrorism, we need to understand where this terrorism is coming from and how do we define terrorism. I think that there is some teaching that we believe that it is leading people to commit this kind of behavior. However, there is injustice that has been inflicted on so many people in the Middle East that they are so angry that they're ready to commit this kind of act. So we are really providing people the roadmap of how to commit these kind of acts.
But Saeed, the sources of that misery are manifold. It's not simply American, or there's many different things that feed into that misery.
Look, if this was an issue that was so simple that we could tweet about it, then we could solve it really in probably the length of time it takes to make a tweet. When we take a look at the actions of Manchester, it's less helpful to just focus strictly on the ideological issue. Everyone wants to look at this as being an Islamic issue, or this is ISIS. But as you said before, are these acts of terror, or are these acts that are crimes? I see an awful lot of parallel between Salman Abedi, the Manchester bomber, a suicide bomber, and the gentleman who walked into a Colorado theater and shot up the theater there, which was not called terrorism, but of course now I'm terrified to go to a movie theater because if somebody is deciding that they're having a bad day, they can go ahead and shoot it up while I'm watching Guardians of the Galaxy. I think
the suggestion though seems to be that Abedi was trained.
Sure.
And there was a bigger network behind him than what a lone wolf actor might be. But that doesn't make it less terrifying if you're in it.
Absolutely, but I think what we're looking at is not just the point where he starts to train. I think we have to understand at what point did he become susceptible to that training.
There's an ideology that is feeding this kind of thinking, but there's also reasons that are driving
I want to
people.
make a point. I think that, I want to go back to what the late Yitzhak Rabin said, which was we should pursue peace as if there is no terrorism, and we should pursue the terrorists as if there is no peace process. And here we sit, a Palestinian and a Jew and I have relatives in Israel, at the table, and I think that's the main message of President Trump's visit, is that let's get the parties to the table, let's try to reduce the terrorism and the violence, and let's get the parties to the table, and let's try to bring peace.
Look, the only way that there will be peace in Palestine is if there's major concessions from both sides. And I as a Palestinian, will tell you what that concession would be to us, would be that there won't be a Palestinian state. That probably won't happen. And the Israelis have to understand that there can't be this Jewish-only thing. We have to live in all the land as one people, one secular democratic state like America.
And I got to leave it there. Gang, thank you very much, all of you, for the conversation. Sandy Baru up next as we talk about heading to Mackinac and Flashpoint after this. Because as we get together for this year's annual policy conference on Mackinac Island, courtesy of the Detroit Regional Chamber, the head of which is Sandy Baru, back with us again. Sandy, thanks for being here. You got a busy week ahead. I want to talk, before we get into this year's, you always leave the prior year with kind of a set of marching orders, or
a to-do list.
Homework.
Yeah.
What was it, and how did we do?
So we had 4 items on our to-do last year. One was to actually continue to focus on economic opportunity and inclusion. Yeah. And what we did over this last year is that we really accelerated our Detroit Promise program. We now have universal college access in the city of Detroit. Right. No matter what school you go to, what kind of school you go to, 2 years, 4 years community college, 4 years university, completely covered the city of Detroit. We focused on mobility. Yeah. Next generation mobility. If we aren't overly competitive as a state of Michigan in next generation mobility, and we're instrumental behind the American Center for Mobility, exactly. Our Mish Auto program is growing by leaps and bounds. We're doing a lot of good things, and there's other things. things on that to-do list, but we did them all.
Those were big, and mobility is, as I've said before on this, become my obsession, in large part because of conversations up on Mackinac. As we head into this year, it's interesting. There's a lot of things going on in the state, plenty going on in the city we need to discuss, and yet, can we have any conversation that isn't immediately infected by the national conversation and what's going on in Washington?
Well, I hope that happens. I just hope it happens civilly, because one of our pillars this year is restoring civility in American discourse and politics.
Can we?
Well, listen, I'm a firm believer in that, but I mean, you know, we purposely put that on the agenda, and that we have a real theme, speakers coming to talk about just that. You know, Harold Ford Jr. and Michael Beschloss, the presidential historian, Ana Navarro from CNN, Stephanie Cutter, who managed Obama's presidential re-election campaign in 2012, Julie Winokur, who's a documentary filmmaker who's traveled the country talking to real people about their views on politics, and especially with what happened in Montana this week, where we elected someone who just beat up a reporter. I mean, we have a long way to go in political civility, and we want to start that discourse. What is the role for leadership? Corporate leadership, political leadership, civic leadership in our state to be able to have that civil conversation.
From the time that you spent in Washington, though, we've seen that breakdown all over the place, where the ecumenicalism just doesn't seem to be there. And I think that's, when you get down to it, what this policy conference was supposed to be about from the start.
Right. You know, I've done 3 tours of duty in Washington, D.C., one in the 80s, one in the 90s, one in the 2000s, right? And it got more polarized, less enjoyable from a kind of bipartisan standpoint each tour of duty. And it's gotten so bad now that, even if invited, I would not go back.
Yeah, it's a tough climate, no doubt about it. I want to ask you a little bit about the governor. He has been a believer in this conference. He's kind of wanted to help model it each year. He's in a tough spot, though, right now, because he really is finding it, we don't see him around Detroit as much for these days. He finds it difficult to get around the Flint conversation and get us to move on to other things. What do you expect out of him this week on the island?
Well, I just finished chairing the governor's 21st Century Economy Commission, so I know firsthand that the governor is focused on leaving a blueprint behind for the state in his last 2 years in office. I mean, he's really focused on what are the big arcs, in terms of trends. What are our talent needs going to be? What are our technology needs going to be? We know that we can't predict the product or the technology that's going to take off in the future. We can't predict the future, but we know what those broad trends are going to be. Yeah. And the governor's really focused on, let's make sure our state is prepared for those big trends. That's what his infrastructure commission was about. That's what his education commission was about. That's what the commission that I chaired was all about. And we're going to talk a lot about that up at the conference.
And I would expect we'll also be talking about the next governor. I expect Brian Calley's going to announce while he's up there, as a matter of fact, is the word. Yeah. So we'll get into that kind of politics as well, won't we?
Well, sir, now we don't use the conference for any political announcements, right? So Brian Calley did it absolutely right. He called us up, said, listen, I want to make an announcement of some sort. I said, I wonder what that could be. But he said, listen, I want to make sure that we're doing it all in the rules, and we found a location for him that's off the Grand Hotel property.
Yeah. All fine. Good luck with another big week.
And we'll see you up there. Thank you for playing a role.
Flashpoint will originate from there next Sunday morning, and we hope you'll join us for that. So until then, have a great week. Meet the Press coming up next, and we'll see you next week from Mackinac Island for